Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cyber from the Frontlines. And today, let me start with a quote from a famous Chinese military strategist and General Sun Tzu. So the quote, Nick, you will love this as well. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And this is from his famous, renowned book, The Art of War. And I cannot emphasize this enough how relatable and relevant this is to our uh, world of cyber as well and cyber threat intelligence in particular. So, as you guys may have guessed, today's topic is on cyber threat intelligence, which is titled Know Your Enemy. And I'm pleased to welcome Nik Koukis to our podcast show, where he will be discussing cyber threat intelligence at length. Nik is a senior cyber threat intelligence analyst at a large healthcare firm. And Nik, I'm so pleased to have you on our show today. Glad to see you after such a long time.
Likewise, I'm glad to be here. I'm so glad you reached out and have this conversation as you and I have shared many conversation in the past. So this is a great opportunity for both of us to kind of catch up.
Awesome, awesome. So let's just get started with if you want to introduce yourself with your background, that would be great.
So Nicholas Koukis, I've been in the private sector since 2016. Prior to 2016, I was active duty military as also a contractor with U.S. government for a handful of years. 2016, I moved over to the private sector working in finance, and now I've been in healthcare for the last little over 2 years now.
Amazing. And I've known you for a long time now, and we, it's great always talking to you. Cool. So with that, let's just understand what a lot of people talk about cyber threat intelligence. It's such a fascinating topic. A lot of people have different thoughts about CTI, as you may be aware as well. So I wanted to understand, what is your perspective on cyber threat intelligence? What does it mean to be a cyber threat intelligence analyst, and what does the program entail?
Well, I'm going to probably say this quite a bit during our conversation, and that word is actionable. Cyber threat intelligence analysts, or CTIs, as I'll use that acronym going forward, is providing actionable intelligence to internal customers at your organization. CTI role means something different to every organization, be it finance, healthcare, hospitality, real estate, any one of the critical infrastructures that the U.S. government defines. A CTI role is going to look a little bit different at every organization. Some organizations, within finance are heavily regulated. In some other sectors, they're not as regulated. Government regulations, oversight, if you will, for those organizations, as well as how does the organization define a CTI role? What are their expectations of a CTI at that particular organization are going to differ. A lot of them will be anchored, and we'll talk about some of those anchor responsibilities. But at every organization, it's going to look a little bit different. Coming from finance to healthcare, there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences and the nuances of each organization.
Awesome. And I really like that you hit upon actionable. That's the key. Actionable, time relevant it has to be, and that's why it is intelligence as opposed to information. So that's the key. So moving on, I know we talk a lot about within the cyber threat intelligence community, the intelligence lifecycle. So I was wondering if you could highlight what that means and what exactly is the cyber threat intelligence lifecycle.
So the intel cycle, some will say five, some sources will have six. this is going to be the anchor for every CTI to a certain extent at the organization. This is, we talked about similarities and differences. This should be one of the similarities, be it whether someone anchors to this particular structure or something that they rely upon. But this is what every CTI should anchor within their organizations. And we're going to start off with planning and direction. And this is where you kind of sit down to help define the role of a CTI at that organization, where whether you're a one-man shop or you're a 30-man shop, 30-person shop at that organization, will help define the role and responsibilities with your internal customers. Intel 471, and I'll give them a lot of credit while we're having a conversation, when it comes to this part of the life cycle, where they have a interview worksheet that is already created that helps and absolutely modify for everybody's benefit to interview your internal stakeholders to find out what it is that they have an expectation of their CTIs. If you're a vulnerability management, and we'll kind of go in that direction just for an example's sake, where when I first arrived, I met with the vulnerability management team and said, okay, here's who I am. Here is my current role as defined by the organization. Here's what I can bring to the table. Here's an interview sheet that I want to fill out with you. And within that interview sheet, it talks about, what is the information that they want to know? How do they want it? How often do they want it? And it's all defined. And that helps me do my job in supporting them. The second part of the life cycle is collections. So as I look at what are their wants, what are their desires, what is it that they want me to help them answer on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis, then I take that and I see, how will I answer these questions? What are the sources that I can go to in order to answer these questions? So as I look at all of my sources, be it paid vendors or free open source intelligence or open source information, can all of that help me do my job in supporting them? And that's where that collection plan comes in. And some can go to the extreme, and some can be very basic on building a collection plan. And that all that is gathering your sources in order to help you answer the questions that your internal customers have. And then you take the processing and exploitation, where now you know the questions, you have the information, and now you're trying to see how all of this fits. So you're processing it, and then we'll kind of slide in, because processing and analyzing are going to be very similar in the production, where you're trying to find out how they take this information and what is it that your customer wants, and now you're molding this into what your customer wants, and you're processing it, and you're all the analysis that's going on in your head, and as you're writing it down, and in some cases, I like to draw a lot of pictures as I'm trying to draw connections. And then, how does your internal customer, want this information? Do they want it in an email? Do they want a 3 or 5 page document? Do they just want it in a chat and provide that? Some of them may want it verbally, so you may have daily, weekly, monthly calls with them to provide this information to them, and then get that information to them. And then one step past dissemination and integration is feedback. Okay, I answered all of your questions. I provided the analysis. Now tell me, was it actionable? Did I provide you valuable information? And can I do a better job the next time? And it's always this continuation, this continual loop of intel and information, where, hey, I provided this, now tell me how I can do better. And you just keep going round and round. And you're getting to the point where it's going to be automatic, and you can do this all in your head, where your customer. And then, it just doesn't have to be vulnerability management. It can be any one of your internal customers and the information that they want.
Yeah, that's perfect. You summed it perfectly. The feedback loop is really important. As we all know, threats keep on changing. New threats come up. Over the last couple of years, I think we have seen an uptick in supply chain attacks. And that's a very good example of why you should also have that feedback loop, because this is a new threat vector, and you need to have your intelligence requirements in place for supply chain as well. So,
and that brings up a good point when you brought up supply chain and you brought up a new threat. It's a new threat, but it's an old threat at the same time. It's a threat that's been around for a long time, but relatively new to the exposure of a CTI at an organization. As I've said in the past, as you look at your roles or our roles within our own organizations, every organization has, stretch goals, or how can I get more bang for my buck, or how can I use my CTI in a bigger role. So if your role is defined only by cyber, and you're defined by supporting IR, SOC, and vulnerability management, but as you look at other threats that can impact your organization, and supply chain being one of them, a CTI can be a valuable asset. As I've said many times here and other organizations, I don't necessarily need a seat at the table, but I want to at least stand in the room while people are having a conversation where I may be able to use some of my skill set in order to provide that particular group with actionable intelligence, using the intel's lifecycle, or, okay, I understand the questions that they're asking because I can hear them talking about it. I can look and see, do the sources that I currently employ, do they already answer these questions? And then, provide all of that, and then sometimes slide them something that can help them make decisions on the supply chain impact that it has to the organization.
yeah, agreed. Uh, so moving on to another topic here. So you touched upon the collection part of the intelligence lifecycle. What would be some of the sources that folks should consider when they are looking at collection per se?
So when you look at a collection, depending upon the organization's size, if you're a small or a medium, you may not have the budget for a lot of sources when it comes to paid vendors. There are a lot of good paid vendors that also provide some free services, but not to the extent, of course, as they're paid. Some of your CrowdStrike, your Silo Breaker, your Recorded Futures, a lot of those big names that people can be familiar with. You have some of your threat intel platform companies, Eclectic IQ, Anomaly, or just a couple of those that are available. A lot of large organizations have the budgets for that, so you have that source of information or that intelligence that comes along. But there's also quite a bit of free intel or information, if you will, that's out there. And it comes in a plethora of different ways. You can get emails sent. You can go to their website. What I like to do, and a lot of other CTIs use, is a news aggregator. Some use Feedly. There are a lot of them that are out there. I use a system called InnoReader, where I can put in a lot of my OSINT or my open source intelligence or my news sources, and it aggregates it all into one spot. So I don't have to go looking at individual websites. I can just go here. It brings in all of my open source information into one spot. I can see all the headlines that are there, and just as a good friend of mine and we were going to start a podcast years ago called "Reading Behind the Headlines," and it's the headline doesn't say it all. You've got to kind of read through, and sometimes in a lot of these articles, the information you're looking for is buried deep within that article. So you just can't kind of skim through that headline. You've got to kind of read through there, and that news aggregator allows you to do that. There's HelpNet Security, there's ARS Technica. They're just there's a great amount that are out there, and folks who may not be familiar, you can even Google top 50, top 100 cyber intel websites that you can go to. And I know I use a pretty high number of 100. You and I both know that sometimes too much information can be a hindrance. You brought up a great word earlier. I've used actionable, and you used the word timely, and both of those go hand in hand. Where if it's not actionable, if it's not right now, if it's information or intel that's 2 or 3 weeks late, it's stale. There's a good chance that my organization was compromised, or we could have been compromised if I didn't provide that information faster. So too much information can also be a hindrance, because that's going to slow you down. And you want to find sources that have great reputations. Some of them, those that I mentioned earlier, and when you kind of Google some of those, reputation is everything. Just like in our field, if you have a reputation of putting out bad intel or bad analysis, your reputation may precede you. But if you have a reputation of good intel, good actionable, good relevant, good timely intel, then that goes a lot farther. So the same thing happens in your news sources. If you've got a great reputation, those are the sources that you want to continue. And same thing with, we'll talk about, Twitter is another great source. There are a lot of great sources that have a good or great or exceptional reputation on Twitter. So those are good, and that information gets out. Everyone is familiar with Twitter, or X, if you will, and that information gets out even faster than the news articles. Once again, can you trust everything you read on the internet? No. Can you trust everything you read on Twitter? No. But those who are trusted, those who have a great reputation, are valuable sources that you can go to. And always, try to find, 2 or 3 sources that provide that information. When you're trying to find something right now, tactical information from Twitter should always, be checked and double checked.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I totally agree. Like, more information, if you have more information, it can sometimes muddy the water, if you will. So it's really important to have your top sources in place. And I may also we can also add, say for example, if you can also follow certain security researchers. They have a reputation, especially like you mentioned, Twitter. That is a very good source as well, and your ISACs, if you're embedded.
Yes.
Awesome. So moving on, for folks who are new to this field and they want to get into cyber threat intelligence, what should be their way to get into this exciting field?
So that's a great question. If I'm just coming out of high school, or if I'm going into college and I want to get a cybersecurity degree, and I want to get into CTI, I would look at, if you want to start off on the very low end, look at, help desks, look at end user support, look at phone support, look at some of those entry level jobs that get your foot in the door and get some experience in the cyber community. We talked earlier about the interview sheets. I should have mentioned also those help create what are called PIRs, or priority intelligence requirements, where you interview your customer to find out what they want. If you get an opportunity to work on the other side of the fence, or those customers that you support on a daily or weekly basis, you have an understanding already of what they're looking for. And so from a threat intel analyst or a CTI perspective, you already can predict or know what they want already. So you already have that knowledge base, that base knowledge that's utilized on the other side. But starting at the bottom is probably the best way if you don't have an extensive experience in, you and I have talked about this before, where I would say the majority, over 50% of those who make up CTIs in the private sector have a military or government, a 3-letter agency background, but there are still quite a bit that do not have that background, that military or that government background. That is vital, and I often say fascinating. And one quick story, where a friend of mine working in retail has there was an interview, kind of like a mock interview, where somebody in retail was talking about their analysts and the background, the fast background that his team had. And one of the folks that works for him submitted an application, and this person has a master's degree in medieval studies. And he said, as he's looking through this person's resume, started to smile and said, this person doesn't have your traditional background of a CTI, but I want to interview this person because they have such a fascinating resume. And she turns out to be one of, the go-to threat analysts in the retail industry for quite a few years. And I often say, fascinating, because they bring a different set of knowledge that those with a government or a military background has going in. So they provide that fresh perspective. We spoke a little bit earlier about supply chain, and how I said, I don't necessarily need to want a seat at the table, but I want a seat in the room while they're talking. I can provide that information. That's something that someone isn't thinking about. That's what I find fascinating about those who are not anchored with a military or a government background, where they provide that fresh perspective. The same knowledge I go to that supply chain meeting, they're coming to this table here and say, have you thought about this or thought about that? And they just have a different way of processing or looking at it initially, which I think, and I'll say it again, just a fascinating perspective. That's something that I'm not anchored to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a fascinating story indeed, and how, like, with a background in medieval studies and
Mhm.
intelligence, that just highlights the fact that if you have a team with different backgrounds, it really becomes a very, very successful team, if you will. So that's really good to hear. And also, like for me, like I come from a civilian background, but it goes both ways. So you learn a lot. You have folks from military or government agencies who understand their perspective as well, and it helps for us as well.
Everyone has something to add. Everyone has something to add. And to kind of talk about some of the traits, some of the key traits that folks in this community have. There was something that a paid vendor years ago talked about the top traits, and some of these I remember from their conversation and their feedback. CTIs have happen to be extroverts. You don't need to be an extrovert to be in a CTI field, but a lot of us have that personality type, because it benefits us, with communication. As a CTI, you want to be able to communicate, verbally or written communication. That's beneficial. Be a problem solver. Be very flexible. There's people often ask, what is it that has kept me in this field for so many years? And I say, because no day looks the same. It's never Groundhog Day. I can log in this morning and my day will look different tomorrow, and Friday will look different than Monday. Some good days and then some not so good days. Some are better than others, and it depends upon what the nature of the work is. Where some days are just a little bit more enjoyable than the others, and also have a good willingness to learn. With either on a technical side, or just growing. We talked earlier about having just stretching just a little bit outside maybe your comfort zone, where that also is key within the CTI community. If you're just sitting there saying, okay, well, these are the parameters of my job and I don't want to go out, number one, you're not being flexible, and it's not likely what the organization is looking for, where you want to kind of stretch. Don't want to stretch too far where you're not focusing on your core job, but enough to kind of stretch and be flexible. So those are just some of the key traits that in my opinion, help make a CTI better and more valuable to their organization.
Absolutely. And networking, as we were discussing earlier as well, networking with other folks within the same community intelligence, it helps a lot with one bringing you add to your connection, as well as you have a handy source as well now that you can rely upon and use that information all the time. So
Yeah, you can't. We talked earlier. If you're a CTI, you can't do this job by yourself. And if you feel that you can do this job by yourself, I would love to meet that person who says, "Oh, I can do this by myself." Where, you know, you and I both have friends in other industries, be it retail, real estate, hospitality. Everyone has something to add. Everyone is bringing something to the table when it comes to just this holistic picture of what's going on. There are some unfortunate wars and conflicts going around the globe that impact each infrastructure in a different way, and to have that folks who are very, very detailed with what they provide their organization is also beneficial to other organizations who don't have to be as detailed, but providing that information to leadership from a strategic picture, if you will, also helps. So having those relationships in other organizations and other industries and other infrastructures are absolutely key to that big global, that big strategic picture that everybody has. And be it you can reach out to government agencies, and they can provide as we'll take Nebraska for instance. The Nebraska Fusion Center has a lot of folks that they reach out to, and that's a great resource. Your ISACs are tremendous, or local groups. You have one right there in New Jersey where that's beneficial, and folks from not just finance, but those from New York City as well, that are from just a great vast background of industries and organizations that provide that big picture is just invaluable.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is the key. If you have, going back to what we said earlier, actionable and timely, helps a lot. Very important. So, moving on to my final question, would you like to share any fun facts about your role in cyber threat? Anything fun?
Fun facts. That's a good question. I don't know if I have any fun facts. I can go on and on, stories, that you and I have experienced ourselves, with regard to, how we do our jobs. And it's definitely a team effort wherever you go. You can be a one-man team, you can be a 3 or a 30-man team. It's just great experiences. And every organization is going to have their little nuances that make them fun. And then you'll have those days that are not so fun, but the good days definitely outweigh the bad days when it comes to CTI. But yeah, yeah. As far as fun facts, that's a harder question to answer right there. But it's a great field. It's like I said, it's a field that doesn't look the same every single day, which is what makes this job enjoyable.
That's so true. Every day, like you said, it's so true. Every day is different threads, different things that you are working. That's what makes it exciting.
If I were to give any advice to someone who's starting a new, starting someplace brand new, it's been around for a few years now in finance, so it's not as fresh there. But find out what your government regulations are at your organization, and that will help build your program. Because and I say this with utmost kindness to the internal auditors, if you can keep the auditors off your back and you can build in your program what the auditors are going to look for daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, your job will be so much easier when it's time for audit and you have that built into your program already. What you do is automatic, and leadership will definitely appreciate when findings come around and your name or your division, your branch is not on that list when it comes to audit.
Awesome. It was really great speaking with you, Nik, and I really enjoyed our discussion, our conversation, and would love to have more in the near future as well. And for folks who are listening, I will also add a couple of resources that you may look into if you want to learn more about CTI. With that, we wish you a very good afternoon or evening wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.